Destination Draft Day, your one-stop shop for all things pro football, college football, and NFL draft. Today we're going to be talking to you about the AFC West, one of the toughest divisions out there in the NFL, home of Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos, Los Angeles Chargers, and Las Vegas Raiders. And, I think it's very easily the toughest division of football, especially heading into this year. The only argument maybe is the NFC West, that western side of football absolutely soaring in terms of performance. But first and foremost, before we dive in, we hope you guys have had a happy Friday so far. We continue it. Nick, how you doing?
Doing good, Michael. Heading into the holiday weekend here. Lots to be excited for. And we're going to be talking about the wild, wild west, because that's truly what it is. It's getting wild. You're very high on the Broncos, so we'll see what happens with them this season. New head coach with the Chargers, and Chiefs got to try to do something that hasn't been done in a long time, which is lose the Super Bowl and get back to it the next season.
Absolutely. And, the first team that we're going to talk about, going in alphabetical order based on city. So the Denver Broncos, like Nick said, I am pretty high on them. Overall, the roster is one of the strongest in the league. The defensive line was about 9 deep last year because of what Vic Fangio just does with his defense. They improved the cornerback unit. They added pieces to the pass rush and to the linebacker core that needed help. Baron Browning, I think, is in for a big career with Vic Fangio as his coach. Obviously added Patrick Surtain at the cornerback position, which was already, added to in this free agency process. The Broncos get a lot stronger overall. The big question mark, though, is that QB position. Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater going to be battling it out all year. I think it's very clear that Drew Lock will probably be the starter to begin things, because it's much easier to go with your long-term starter and then bench him than it is to kind of bench him right away and then maybe go back. But, Nick, do you think that there's a chance that Drew Lock can put it together this season and become a long-term answer for the Broncos at the QB position?
Yeah, I'm higher on Lock than a lot of people, so it wouldn't really surprise me. Last year, I thought he was going to have a great year. He got injured, so kind of never gave him the chance there. But I think the Broncos want to see what Teddy Bridgewater has, so I don't think it's a foregone conclusion here that Lock is actually the week 1 starter. Right now, I think that's definitely the case going into training camp, but it's going to be a true battle to see who is actually going to be the starting quarterback for the Broncos when we kick off the season against the New York Giants.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people have talked about Vic Fangio as someone who's potentially on the hot seat there in Denver, and the odds came out. I believe he was second in favor to be the first head coach fired when it came to this season. Do you think that Vic Fangio is in a make or break situation this year? Or do you think that he's going to get a little bit of a longer leash due to, them not addressing the quarterback position?
NFL franchises are extremely impatient, and unfortunately, I think if Fangio doesn't get his team to a winning record this season, because 500 doesn't exist anymore, then unfortunately for him, he is going to be back to a coordinator next season. I think he will likely be relieved of his job at the end of the season if the Broncos do not at least have a winning record.
I think that's certainly a possibility. George Patton brought in as GM. I feel like with the Vikings assistant, front office member, it was absolutely a key piece. The Broncos kind of showed a lot of Vikings-type signs in their offseason. Could you see maybe the game plan being similar to where we see Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams both kind of used in that, outside zone-type running scheme, and really where we see maybe a great season in the run game, like we saw a breakout sort of season in Cleveland where they really took that next step as a running the ball type scheme?
Yeah, I really think they're going to be run heavy, which is kind of, we could talk about this for a little bit. I'm a little surprised that they did not decide to bring Phillip Lindsay back. Homegrown product, drafted him. He's from Denver, and he was really good. Obviously, they bring in Melvin Gordon last year, but I kind of liked the dynamic that we were hoping to see between Gordon and Lindsey. What were your thoughts on them deciding to get rid of Lindsey, who is going to be backing up Johnson now with the Texans?
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit surprising. In my eyes, I thought that Lindsey was, a pretty good weapon to have, especially with Melvin Gordon already as the main running back taking most of the carries. Lindsey kind of added that third down back type scheme, really. And they had the money to make it work if they wanted Lindsey, but it just seemed like they kind of said, we're good. And I mean, maybe they just have had their eyes on Javonte Williams for that long that they didn't want a third back in that system. But I don't know. It did seem a little weird. It did seem kind of, I don't know what the proper word is, kind of questionable in terms of the decision. But I mean, if they really think Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon can be that backfield, then I get it. And I do think that the talent's there to where that duo could really take over the league.
Yep. And, this year, I mean, they'll at least have some quarterbacks. You remember last year with COVID, they had no quarterback for a game, and they literally just had no chance to win that game. But things are going to be very different this season, and fans back, so that'll be exciting. But I think with Locke and Bridgewater, there is talent there, and ultimately, it's probably going to come down to can both of these guys stay healthy? Because if there's a chance Locke gets hurt and Bridgewater comes in and he gets hurt too. At that point, you're not looking good. You're looking to get Blake Bortles in there. I don't know if he's with the team anymore, but that's the kind of scenario you're looking at. So a lot of this is going to come down to the offense this season for the Denver Broncos.
Absolutely. And, the big rumor this offseason surrounding Denver is one that has kind of lingered with them even past the draft, and that is Aaron Rodgers potentially being their huge trade target. The rumors are going to be there for until Aaron Rodgers really has something come out, whether it's an extension or it's an official trade somewhere else. If you're the Denver Broncos, with the roster they have in place, it kind of seems like QB is just the big question mark in terms of getting to that next step. How much would you be willing to invest in terms of picks and capital to really make sure you go and get an Aaron Rodgers? And do you think that a move like that could really be risky in terms of, you're kind of sacrificing capital and future picks that could hurt your franchise long term?
Well, Blake Bortles, by the way, on the Packers now. So the thing with Rodgers' situation is I don't know why Aaron Rodgers would want to be a Bronco. I guess he thinks the roster is there that helps him to win. I personally don't think Aaron Rodgers has a better chance to win the Super Bowl next season with the Broncos than he does with the Packers. So that's point one. But if I'm the Broncos, if I'm any team, basically, almost, the NFL, I'm giving up whatever it takes to get Aaron Rodgers because he is the difference maker. There's a lot of teams I could look at right now around the league and say, oh, if they had Aaron Rodgers, they could maybe be a Super Bowl contender. The Saints, the Giants. Broncos probably are a playoff team with Aaron Rodgers. But there's a lot of spots where Aaron Rodgers would be needed and a huge upgrade. So if you're the Broncos, especially, the GM situation is tricky there. But Fangio, he's probably saying, I got to save my job here. I would love to give up whatever it takes to get Aaron Rodgers here. But you got to ask yourselves, ultimately, is Aaron Rodgers going to work out here in my situation? He is older. Do I have a contingency plan? Broncos, they don't really know what they're doing with the quarterback position for the long term. So it could be okay there because if you make it public, you want to go for Rodgers with a team that you have an established quarterback, that's going to burn a bridge. You can hurt yourself long term overall. So to me, if I'm any team, really, most teams, I do what it takes to get Aaron Rodgers. It seems like there's limited options, though, as to where Rodgers could potentially end up this season, just based on who's got the draft capital. It seems like the teams that have the most draft capital are in the NFC. Packers kind of making it known if they were to trade Rodgers, it's not going to be within the NFC. So who does that leave? It leaves the Raiders and it leaves the Broncos. And either way, it's not good news for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Absolutely. And, we look at things from a schedule perspective. The Broncos don't have the hardest of starts. First 3 games, they travel to New York. Then they play the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets. Do you think that those first 3 games play in their favor? And, with a good start, do you think that could carry momentum to where they could really make playoffs after doing well in that 3-game stretch?
Yeah, I think they could go 2-1 there, potentially 3-0. I think the Giants game is probably the hardest game there to win, just because the Giants defense is really good, or was really good last year. Broncos offense is not great. Broncos are going to have no problem, getting pressure on Daniel Jones. That's for sure. So that's what they can win that game. Jaguars, we'll see where they're at. Jets, they'll be better, but they're going to be, a team that's winning more than 6 games. To me, though, I don't know. I don't see the Broncos making the playoffs. I could see them winning 7 games, which would be an improvement over the last year. But just looking at their schedule, they got that easy start, but then they gotta play the AFC North. So there's 3 really good teams there this season. The West is loaded, as you mentioned. So there's really not that many easy games. They do play the Lions later in the season, though. They got the Bengals, so that's 2 winnable games. They're playing the NFC East, so there are winnable games there. I just view them as a middle-of-the-road team this season.
I think that's fair. I don't think anyone's wrong if they aren't entirely high on the Denver Broncos. A big game in my mind is that Week 5 matchup at Pittsburgh. The Steelers could really be going any which way, and having a game like that, especially with the offensive line currently in place for the Steelers, there's a lot of question marks that are there on that offensive line. So if the defensive line there in Denver can really get pressure on Big Ben, slow down Najee Harris, then we could see some great performances, and we could be looking at that Week 5 matchup as what gets the Broncos to potentially 4-1 if all things are really rolling. And, I think really it comes down to, can Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, one of them, just not entirely tear this team down. And I know that Shermer has to call a decent offense. There has to be moves that are made, but I think everything on this roster is good enough besides QB. And as long as Drew Lock can have some of those performances where he showed promise, then this team is realistically a contender. I know that sounds ridiculous, but most likely, though, we aren't going to see Drew Lock have his highs consistently, at least. So we're going to see a lot of down performances where the issues continue. And that's why I think they'll be a middling team. But I think there is definitely a chance where they're in that back end of the playoff spots, getting that 7 seed. And if that happens, I think Fangio deserves a world of credit, because this roster is just built tremendously well for his system. And I think with the offense not entirely costing him, he can have a great year.
Who has the better opportunity to succeed this season, Drew Lock or Sam Darnold?
Oh, absolutely, Drew Lock. I mean, you look at the Denver Broncos have a great offensive line. Even with the injuries to Juwan James, I think you can still see just so much talent on this offensive line. They have Lloyd Cushenberry, who's done well, but also Quinn Miners right behind him, Graham Glasnow and Dalton Reisner. Garrett Bowles put up a phenomenal year. And then look at the receiving unit: Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Seth Williams, they drafted in the draft. So, I mean, there's weapons on this team. Noah Fant at tight end. The opportunities are endless. I know Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, those are great pieces, but the offensive line, I think, is what makes the difference here. And Denver has a great one, while Carolina's is going to continue to have some issues. And, some other great teams in the AFC West. It's not just a Denver show, obviously. Probably the top dog, not only of the AFC West, but of the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs, looking to get to their 3rd Super Bowl in a row, looking to win their 2nd in 3 years. Nick, just first and foremost, are you counting on the Chiefs to come back and win it all this year, or what's your thoughts on the Chiefs for this season?
No shot. I don't see any way that they'll win the Super Bowl this year. 2 long seasons, go to Super Bowl. They get beat last year. I think they're going to take a step back this season. The reason for that mostly is because of fatigue, the extra game, and the fact of the matter is that the Raiders, they're probably still the same. Chargers are better, Broncos are better. So I think that we're looking at a 13-4 season. Might not be good enough to get the 1 seed this year. I think the 1 seed is very important if the Chiefs have any ideas about getting back to the Super Bowl. Obviously, the 1 seed is the only team that gets the bye in the playoffs now, and it would be crucial to their success next season. So the Chiefs, still a good team. I just think it's going to be very hard for them to go back to the Super Bowl for a 3rd straight year.
And the schedule's not favorable to them either. You look at the Cleveland Browns week 1, Baltimore Ravens week 2, the rising Los Angeles Chargers week 3. Then they get a game against Philadelphia, which I think most people would expect them to handle fairly easily. Then week 5, they play Buffalo. Week 6, they play Washington. Week 7, they play Tennessee. And then week 8, the New York Giants, which is another team that could potentially be rising and playing to that level. Assuming that the Chiefs are full health, they should be able to win that one, though. And then week 9 against the Green Bay Packers. While the Chiefs are probably favorites in many of those matchups, it's definitely not an easy first 9, in my opinion. And really, we could see a little bit of a stumble out the gates, especially with those first 2 games against the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah. To me, if I was looking at their schedule and I said they're going to have probably 4 losses, I think they're going to lose to the Browns. It just happens with these good Super Bowl losers the year before. They always tend to come out flat in the first game. I think they will split the season series with the Chargers. I think they will lose to the Bills, and then they're probably going to lose either to the Raiders in one of those games or they will lose to the Packers. Everything else, I think they should pretty much roll through the schedule. But, you did make an interesting point there about that Giants game. We'll have to see how the Giants are playing at that point in November. Giants are a team right now that a lot of people, are getting a little high on, but it's hard to justify at this point, not knowing how the offense is going to play. But overall, that's how I'm looking at the Chiefs here. Like you mentioned, coming out right away and playing the 2 other best teams in the conference. Maybe actually you're playing maybe 3 of the best teams in your conference in the first few weeks with the Browns, the Ravens, who we think are already a playoff team, and the Bills, and then not to mention the uprise Chargers. Not an easy first few batch of games there for the Chiefs. And just going based off last year, they're playing 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the first 7 weeks that were in the playoffs last year, plus the Chargers, who are on the rise. Not going to be an easy task. And I don't think the Chiefs are going to roll through this season like they did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big story surrounding the Chiefs is the additions on the offensive line. Joe Thuney in free agency, Orlando Brown at left tackle in the trade with the Baltimore Ravens. They add Austin Blythe. They also have Creed Humphrey. They get Duvernay Tardif back from the opt-out from last COVID season. Lucas Niang back. A lot of this line is definitely a question mark, but it's definitely enticing as well, because while it's an entirely new offensive line that maybe you question the experience of the batch, it's the talent's there. So what do you expect from this offensive line? Do you think that was a big addition, or do you think that it's a mistake to move on from Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, who were good when healthy last year, but sadly, when the Super Bowl came, things weren't healthy?
Right, I guess. I mean, you make the move to move on basically based on hoping that the new guys could stay healthy. That's the key for the Chiefs. We know they're going to score. We know their defense is pretty solid. Spagnuolo, I think, is the best defensive coordinator in the league. But it's a matter of, is their offensive line going to stay healthy? Because that's what the Buccaneers did. They exposed the Chiefs because they didn't have their main guys at the offensive line. So the Bills go ahead and draft a defensive end in their first rounds to match up against that. We know the Browns have a great defensive end pass rush. So it's really going to come down to, not in the regular season, because I think they'll be fine in that sense, but in the playoffs, is this new offensive line going to gel? And I think at this point, it is certainly a question mark.
Absolutely. And, the defensive side of things has always kind of been inconsistent for them as well. There's been some great moments, and there's been some moments that really didn't play to their favor. They trade for Mike Hughes this offseason, a low value trade, just trying to get max value out of him. The cornerback unit with L'Jarius Sneed back should be huge. Tyrann Mathieu and Juan Thornhill are probably one of the better safety duos in the league. You look at the defensive line, the big question mark is what's going to happen at that other defensive end spot. The defensive line itself, pretty solid, though. Frank Clark, Chris Jones, Derek Nottie, Jaron Reed, definitely some great players. They add Nick Bolton in the draft to really help out in that linebacker unit. Do you expect this defense to take a next step, or do you think they'll continue to kind of be a full-on, if the offense clicks, then we're going to be all right, but if the offense isn't, then we're in hot water?
Yeah, I think it's more so that it could be hot water. It's just going to depend on how this team gets out of the gate. And if they get out well, I think they're going to gel, and there should be no problem. But a lot of tough matchups there, so we'll see relatively early on how they're stacking up against the other elite in the league.
Absolutely. And, looking at it from the schedule perspective, we talked about the first 9, but those next games aren't easy either. Week 10, they play the Raiders, who we talked about, could potentially steal one pretty easily. Week 11, they play the Dallas Cowboys, who at full strength could really take major strides this year. They get the bye week. They play Denver, who, we just talked about potential there to really be a strong team. They play the Raiders again. They play the Chargers again. Steelers, Bengals, and then finish off Week 18 against the Denver Broncos one last time. If you were setting an expectation in terms of record, you kind of already said it a little bit, but what's your prediction? Now that we've gone through the schedule, if you're trying to make a just overall record range, what type of range should they expect as Chiefs fans?
Yeah, I think 13-4 is what I'd be looking at. Maybe you're looking at 12-5 as the bare minimum. Still going to be a great team. Still going to win double-digit games. Still going to win the division. It's just a matter of how they're still going to get that 1 seed. That's to be determined.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of fans probably are less worried about the record and more worried about where they end up in the playoff scheme of things, So if you were to make the prediction where they get in that playoff range, what's your predict? Obviously we haven't seen the field. We don't know where they're going to be, what matchups they're going to have. But in terms of where you think they'll go, and what teams do you think pose the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC?
Biggest threats: Bills and Browns. I feel like the Bills could get the 1 seed, which would be bad news for the Chiefs because then they got to play the Browns before the conference championship, and the Browns should have beat the Chiefs last year. So, I think the Browns in their heads think we can play with these guys, we can beat them. So I think the Chiefs are probably like the 2 seed, maybe the 3 seed at worst. Then they'll be in the mix there to, at the very least, get back to the Super Bowl. It should probably be a Final 4 team once again.
I think the conference finals is probably the almost bare minimum that Chiefs fans should expect.
Right, like your Patriots. Every year you knew they were going to be in the conference finals.
But I really think that the Chiefs are still the team to beat in the AFC, probably the team to beat in the NFL. I understand that they aren't the reigning Super Bowl champion, but I feel like everyone still looks at the Chiefs and says, we got to bring our A game. And I think that's hard to do against the Chiefs for a reason. The defense side of things gets things done. The offense can outscore anyone within minutes. I think that the Chiefs are going to make the Super Bowl, but, like Nick said, it's hard to just consistently get back time and time again. Even you look at, the successful Patriots reign or whatever, they weren't making it every single time. So, it's hard to just be like, oh, yeah, Chiefs again. And then next year we're saying, oh, yeah, Chiefs. And then the year after that we're saying, Chiefs will be there. So,
yeah, really,
here's where they miss.
Especially when you lose the Super Bowl, typically you don't make the playoffs next year. Look at the 49ers last year. They're going to make the playoffs, but it's just very tough. Now, if the Chiefs defense continues to play extremely well, Michael, do we see Spagnuolo up for a coaching job next offseason?
I think there's certainly a possibility, but I think the big name on that coaching staff that needs this opportunity is Eric Bieniemy, and a good season again. I
We
think
keep hearing that. I don't know, Michael. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
after a while, he'll just be the full-time OC and never leave. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those coaches definitely deserve their chance. Mike Kafka, the QB coach, will eventually get an opportunity as well. Spagnuolo could very well find himself in coaching interviews and get the chance to be a head coach again. It's going to be interesting to see. And, that whole Chiefs, I think the big question mark is less so short term and more just long term. What are they going to do to replace Bieniemy when he's gone? What are they going to do to replace Spagnuolo if he ever leaves? What are they going to do to replace some of the talent on this roster that they won't be able to afford because of,
Right.
having to pay Mahomes that record-setting deal?
Right. The Mahomes money kicks in 2022. So this is kind of like the win now window is this season. I'm sure Kelsey, they'll keep. Interested to see what they do with Hill as far as negotiating with him. But ultimately, that salary cap is going to catch up to them. So they'll have to do a great job of continuing to draft and develop late in the rounds with their picks.
Yeah, and I think some of the big question marks for the Chiefs this year, and maybe it doesn't result in much on the field, but still you'd like to see that next step offensively. Running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a solid season, but kind of disappointing given that he was picked in the first round, had that excellent week 1 performance, and then kind of, split the backfield with Le'Veon Bell, put up some average weeks, but overall wasn't dominant in the way you'd probably kind of hope. And then Sammy Watkins leaving as that wide receiver 3, kind of taking away the size in that wide receiver room. Demarcus Robinson going to step in as that wide receiver 3. They drafted Cornell Powell in the draft. What do you expect from these offensive positions that kind of maybe underwhelmed last year that need to take the next step for the Chiefs to be just full out unstoppable?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs, they need to, give full confidence to Clyde Edwards-Helaire this year. Doesn't look like Bell's going to be back. And it's funny you mentioned Bell because he, as of today, Mike, he is ripping the Jets. He's blaming them for everything as he's languishing in fringe. Nobody's signing him. He's insisting he's going to play next year. He's blaming the Jets' play calling for his decline. He says the Jets' lack of opportunities when he was with the team have hurt his public image here. He got an opportunity with the Chiefs, but he just didn't look too good. I think he hurt himself by sitting out the whole season with the Steelers in the prime of his career. So we can talk about Bell if we want, but I'd expect that the Chiefs have a little more confidence in Clyde Edwards-Helaire this season and give him the ball some more.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bell could find himself in a new position. Maybe he could potentially be in a spot like San Francisco if the backfield opens up now that Jeff Wilson's been hurt. We could find him, elsewhere. But I do think that there's been a little bit of decline overall in what he can do. And it sucks to see because Le'Veon was one of the most exciting running backs when he was playing at full strength. But I do think that his window was kind of wasted with the Jets. But ultimately, he knew what he was getting into with Adam Gase. He knew that the offensive line wasn't that great. I think he followed the money of that offseason and didn't really look at the team, and the Jets team was an issue.
Absolutely. Really, I could see him maybe with the Dolphins and maybe do like an outside chance with the Raiders, but I don't know. I don't really see where this guy's going to sign before the season. I think there'll be an opportunity for him if there's injuries, which there will be, and somebody will take a flyer on him and bring him in.
Absolutely. And moving on to the next team in the AFC West, the Las Vegas Raiders, John Gruden, hoping to finally kind of make this next step. They've really rebuilt their entire offensive line, adding Alex Leatherwood at right tackle, Andre James stepping in at right or at center. They cut Gabe Jackson, Denzel Good, most likely going to be the starter at right guard. Derek Carr, Henry Ruggs, John Brown added this offseason. There's just a lot of pieces that are returning, but also a lot of new pieces in Las Vegas. Do you think that this year is make or break for Gruden, or do you think that contract is definitely going to keep him around regardless of what happens this season?
Yeah, I think with a 10-year deal, he's going to be fine. So job security wise, it's I think you got to question, does Mike Mayock stick around on his own will? Because maybe he's not really impacting things. Maybe it's really just the Gruden show. He might say, "I had enough of this. Let me get out of here." I think Gruden is safe though. Look at the progress they've made year from year, record wise, and ultimately that's all that matters. They're right in the mix last year to make the playoffs, and they should be in that same range this season.
Yeah, a lot of this roster is kind of in an interesting spot because we've talked about Gruden already as maybe on the hot seat. A lot of fans kind of questioning it, but at the same time, he's probably going to be around, and I think that's kind of the same situation with Derek Carr. There's talks every year about he's probably on the hot seat with a bad year, but he's probably going to stick around in Las Vegas. He's probably going to be the QB long term. What are your expectations out of this Raiders offense and Derek Carr specifically? With Henry Ruggs hopefully taking some major steps in year two, John Brown added, Hunter Renfrow being one of the more underrated slot receivers in the league. What do you think we could see out of this Las Vegas Raiders offense?
I think Hunter Renfrow is going to be awesome. I think he fits in perfectly with Derek Carr, with what he looks to do. Beyond that, I think the Raiders offense is going to be very hit or miss. Sometimes, Derek Carr might throw 5 touchdown passes. Next week, he might, throw 1 and 2 interceptions. So it's going to be up and down. And I think the Raiders always tend to play to their competition level. And they kind of got a mixed batch this season with their schedule. So I think the offense is going to be pretty average for this upcoming season.
And they've added some pieces to their defense as well. Casey Hayward to the cornerback room, Trevon Moehrig in the draft, Tyree Gillespie added as well to help out. They added Divine Diablo to kind of play in that linebacker type role. The defensive line adding Yannick Ngakoue to a unit that already has Max Crosby and Cleveland Farrell, I think will be interesting to see. I think that could definitely help generate some pass rush. Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, they added a bunch of 5-tech defensive tackles. Do you think that the Raiders defense can finally kind of recover from what was a pretty bad season last year?
Yeah, I think Ngakoue is a tremendous addition to the team, and I think the Raiders defense is kind of primed to maybe carry them in a few games this season. And I think that's really going to be the key to their success as to whether or not they can make the playoffs this season is going to be that defense.
Absolutely. And, we talked about it already a little bit. Casey Hayward added to this unit. Obviously, wasn't 100% last year in terms of what we've seen from him in his career, but the Raiders cornerback unit, kind of young, inexperienced. Do you think adding a veteran, especially one that was as good as Casey Hayward, could be huge for this defense to take those next strides in the secondary?
Yeah, I think they needed somebody like that in the secondary. Secondary has been a bit of an issue for the Raiders, so they're not going to get the person, the draft that they maybe were targeting. They maybe thought, okay, we're at the picking wise, we're not going to be able to get somebody of this caliber, so bring him in. And when you're going against Tyreek Hill and Mike Williams 4 times a year, you need to make sure that you are picking people who can lock down some coverage, and those guys are very hard to cover as is. So all I can really do is help.
Absolutely. And what are your expectations for John Brown to add to this offense? And what are your expectations out of Henry Ruggs in year 2 after what was maybe a little bit of a disappointing first year out of the receiver?
Yeah, John Brown, I think, is going to be a solid addition. He was pretty good. He's pretty good last year. Definitely made a difference in the season, and he was unhappy with the end of his tenure there with the Bills. So maybe he's rejuvenated now, ready to go. I think he'll do well. Henry Ruggs, not impressed with what I saw last season, and you got to worry about that sophomore slump, especially when you're coming off a not so great rookie freshman season.
Absolutely. And, the question marks surrounding the overall roster offensively could be something that comes out this season, but also I love what they've done. Josh Jacobs, as long as he can play all the games, I think he's going to be in for an excellent season. Henry Ruggs should hopefully take some strides. Brian Edwards as well. John Brown, I think, is going to be dependable. Hunter Renfrow, obviously very underrated slot receiver that I think is going to do well. And that kind of makes this wide receiver room a lot better than what we were dealing with last year, where it was just two rookies that were kind of trying to carry the entire load. And that's just not a good way to set up your QB for success. Darren Waller is a stud, probably one of the best receiving weapons in the NFL. And the offensive line, it's surprising to say this because Tom Cable had some bad years in Seattle, but the way they've kind of just developed offensive linemen consistently and nonstop makes me have faith in no matter who they're willing to put up there. So I expect the Raiders to have a pretty good year protection-wise, and hopefully with the added weapons, with the added development of their young players, Derek Carr and the Raiders can be in for a great season. But from a schedule perspective, things aren't easy. First week, they go against the Baltimore Ravens. Next week, they go against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Third week, they go against the Miami Dolphins. Then week 4, they play at Los Angeles Chargers. And week 5, they play Chicago. Nick, those first 5 games, definitely some strong defenses, no matter how you slice it. This is definitely going to, be big in terms of proving it as an offense. Do you think that they step up to the challenge and have a good first 5 weeks, or do you think things go south early?
The thing with Gruden, since he's been the Raiders coach, is like they can look so bad 1 week or maybe 2 weeks in a row, maybe 3 weeks in a row, and then they just like run off like 2 crazy wins. They're very like Jekyll and Hyde type of team here, Jekyll and Hyde. Ravens, the Ravens we think are a better team, but it's it's a night game to kick off the season, so tonight, Monday night, whatever, it could go either way. You don't know. We don't know what, and it's going to be crazy. Legion Stadium. We talked about the Ravens. We did their breakdown. The Raiders fans are going to be ready to go for that one. They're going to be hyped up. It's going to be wild. Steelers is that week 2 with the Steelers. We don't know what to expect from the Steelers. Dolphins there. Honestly, I could see them. I could see the Raiders going anywhere from 2-3 to maybe 5-0 to start the season. You just don't know with this team, and that's why I ultimately think they're like an 8-9 or a 9-8 team, right around 500. A lot of games that go either way. A lot of games that they lose, you think they should have won. A lot of games that they win, you're like, I can't believe this team won. That's kind of how it's been with the Raiders, and I think it's continuing to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think I agree. We'll have some games where they come out and look strong, and people say, watch out for the Raiders. And then some games where they just fall out flat. And really, that's kind of been the story of the Gruden era. So maybe things get more consistent this season and we see a strong team. If the Raiders are at their best, though, do you think that they have a chance to steal the AFC West from the Kansas City Chiefs?
No shot. And really, because I think this year they're not even the second best team in their division. And the team I think is the second best team is the team we will get to momentarily.
Absolutely. I think I agree. The Chiefs, as good as the division is, I don't think they have a chance of losing it unless, for some horrible reason, health comes into it. But hopefully, everyone's healthy this year. And I think for all these teams, there's plenty of reason for optimism, but I don't expect just dominance from all of them as well because they'll knock each other out. Personally, I look at what the expectations for the Raiders should be, and I think if you're a Raiders fan, this is the year that you really should be all in on we need to make the playoffs. And I know that there's going to be some reasons why, maybe it's excused for why they didn't make it, and there's going to be some reasons why you kind of maybe drop your expectations at times, but still, this roster is deep enough to where playoffs are realistically on the table for whoever finishes second in the AFC West, potentially whoever finishes third if the season is good enough. So really, it's just, if I'm a Raiders fan, I say, okay, we have our QB in place. We have added weapons to this offense. We have added defensive talent. We've created some talent in the secondary with free agency in the draft. I'm playoffs or bust if I'm a Raiders fan. And I'm saying, like, this is kind of the season that tells me if I think Gruden's going to be here for that entire 10-year contract or not.
Yeah, if you're a Raiders fan, you're sick of missing the playoffs here. They haven't made it since that great season with Del Rio, and they ended up firing him to bring in Gruden. And first year in Las Vegas was last year, no fans. So this is like their first full experience in Las Vegas this season with the fans. And the expectations are definitely high for the Raiders.
I think so as well. And I think the big question mark is going to be, how are these rookies going to contribute? Do you have any expectations, out of Trevon Moehrig and out of Alex Leatherwood in year one, or what would you kind of expect to see out of them as a fan for what they should bring in that first season?
I was puzzled by the Leatherwood pick. Braden is making strong impressions on his teammates right now, but I thought it was a bit of reach there. So just for a sense of the fact that he's picked, the 17th pick, I don't think he was a first round pick. A lot of pressure on this guy to live up to these expectations, and I just don't know if he's going to be able to do so when you're going against such great talent in the division alone on the defensive line side of things.
Yeah, and I would agree that I didn't expect Leatherwood to be the pick, but it makes sense based on the Raiders drafting habits. They love to go for those blue chip type schools that have a 4-year starter that's been a captain of the team.
If you're a wide receiver, or if you went to Alabama, there's a great chance the Raiders want to pick you.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thought process there. Obviously, there's plenty of talent and potential there with Leatherwood. So if Tom Cable can unlock that, then they probably got a good pick, despite maybe it being surprising. I expected him to be a first-round pick, and I wouldn't have been surprised, but it still is kind of a reach, despite maybe not being as shocked as the consensus. Really, though, it's like I said before, Tom Cable has done plenty for the Las Vegas Raiders in terms of developing offensive line talent, that if you're a Raiders fan, high expectations are perfectly reasonable for Leatherwood because of what Cable has already proven to be able to do with Colton Miller and many others. And the last team in the AFC West, the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert set the world on fire with a dominant rookie season. Now he hopes to capitalize on a year two. You look at the wide receiver room: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler hoping to be fully healthy this year. No Hunter Henry, but they had Jared Cook to that tight end room. The offensive line has added talent with Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater. First and foremost, just this offense alone, what are your expectations for the Los Angeles Chargers in this upcoming season?
I think Justin Herbert has a legit chance to be MVP. The offense is going to be really good. The only thing you get a little hesitation about is the fact that it's a new system here for Herbert. He was very good last year with Anthony Lynn, so we'll see if there's any growing pains there. But as long as the new coordinators coming in and the coaches are building it around Herbert rather than their system, I think it should be fine. I think the Chargers offense is going to be really dynamic this year and explosive in a lot of games.
I think I agree with you. They also had Jalen Guyton, who kind of broke out last year as a young player. Josh Palmer added in the draft. Tyron Johnson and Joe Reed really showed up some decent talent. And I think there's plenty of potential for this offense to really be quite deep at the wide receiver position. Austin Eckler going to steal plenty of reps. If I'm looking at this from a fantasy perspective, I'd honestly advise you to kind of stay away from Keenan Allen. Maybe I'm, being foolish here, but that wide receiver room is quite deep. KJ Hill is looking at possibly a wide receiver 7, maybe Joe Reed is, but there's just plenty of weapons to go around, and I would worry about the consistency week to week from that Chargers offense. For the defensive side of things, though, Brandon Staley hired as the coach, so much proof that he's going to be a dominant defensive coordinator. What he did in that year with the Rams was just absolutely phenomenal. Big question mark, though, is that cornerback room. Asante Samuel Jr. as a rookie, Michael Davis had some ups and downs as a player last year, but that front 7 with Jerry Tillery, Linval Joseph, Justin Jones as the defensive lineman, Nwosu and Bosa at the edge, Kenneth Murray and Kaiser White inside at linebacker. This team could be very scary, assuming it's healthy. And one big piece of that health question mark is Derwin James, kind of the Joel Embiid of the NFL with how the injuries have kind of put him on the sideline for so long. Do you think that Derwin can stay healthy, and do you think this Chargers defense can really be at full strength for the season?
It's tough. I mean, he hasn't been able to do it in a while here, but he's definitely key to their success. And if he's able to stay in the field, then the defense is going to be good, and we're looking at a playoff team, I think, Michael.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you. You know, the Chargers have question marks, and Justin Herbert obviously has to make some big plays in what will be a tougher situation. But schedule doesn't start off too bad, despite there being some talented teams. Washington football team week 1, definitely a huge test for the offensive line. Week 2 against Dallas, but then things start to ramp up. They'll play the Chiefs, the Raiders, Cleveland Browns, and the Baltimore Ravens in those first 6 weeks. You know, going against the NFC East in those first 2 games can be a nice way to build momentum. What are your expectations for the Chargers early in this season with that schedule?
Listen, I think the Chargers are primed for success here early in this season. I think Washington, they took a step back, in my opinion, with Fitzpatrick as a starting quarterback. The Cowboys, sure, they got Dak back now. I think the Chargers could definitely beat them. Would I be shocked if the Chargers went into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs? No. The Raiders, that could go either way. Browns will be a tough game. I could see them beating the Ravens. I could see them beating the Patriots. Then you're in the middle of the schedule here, and it's not that bad, Michael. They got the Eagles. They got the Vikings. They're going to play the Steelers, which could be tough. Then they got the Broncos, and then really they have a pretty easy schedule here in the sense of look at the rest of the division, because they're playing the Bengals, they're playing the Texans. I think the NFC East, in addition to that, there's 5 games right here that you could pretty much chalk in for a win for the Chargers.
Absolutely, and if they're able to step up in tough games, and they are in for a very good season. Asked it about the Raiders. Now we're going to ask it about the Chargers. If things are, full health, playing well, can the Chargers steal the AFC West from the Kansas City Chiefs?
I think they can, Mike. I really think they can. I think, if the defense is good, we'll see how it works with the new coach. But this team, I think they could win 11 games. They could win 12 games. So you're talking about a few breaks here and there. Obviously, they got to beat the Chiefs in their matchups. Could they win 13 games? Yeah, sure. So I think if any team has a chance to beat the Chiefs in this division, it's going to be the Chargers. Overall, I think 10 wins, 11 wins. I think this team is probably going to be in the playoffs next season.
I think that's definitely a realistic expectation. Obviously, if things do slip a little bit, there's going to be some forgiveness. Justin Herbert already showed a dominant first year. As long as he keeps up pretty good play, I think the faithful will stay very sold on Justin Herbert. And then, first-year head coach, you can kind of have that first year where you're kind of prepping to really take off in full launch. But it's hard not to get optimistic as a Chargers fan. Joey Bosa, Derwin James, some of the best defense players in the league. Kenneth Murray had a great year. There's just so much talent on this team that's hard to overlook. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, obviously. Rumors that they could potentially be in on Julio Jones in a trade. There's just plenty of intrigue surrounding this Chargers team. What would you say is a realistic expectation in terms of record and playoff success for the Chargers in Brandon Staley's first year as head coach?
Yeah, I think record-wise, 10 wins, 11 wins, probably their max there. I would say you're looking at 9 wins minimum, 9-8. So you're kind of like, all right, maybe that's good enough to make the playoffs. I don't see this team, making a deep playoff run here, but I think there should be a playoff team just based on the talent that you're seeing around this roster. And now that we looked at the whole AFC, just looking at MVP candidates just from the AFC. You got two guys in this division, in Mahomes and Herbert, and I think you got to look at Josh Allen. And I think you could always consider Lamar Jackson if he goes crazy again. But there's a lot of talent, and I think at this point, as far as superstars is concerned, advantage to AFC. A lot more of the big names coming out of the AFC this upcoming season.
Absolutely agree with you. And, Justin Herbert has really resonated so much hype for him that it seems like MVP is almost the expectation for him because of the trend of seeing sophomores, take that next jump. We'll see what happens. Personally, for me, if I'm a Chargers fan, I think the big thing that I want to see is closing out games, because that was a huge issue under Anthony Lynn, was one-score games that just did not fall in their favor consistently. So if you are a Chargers fan, you want to see those one-possession games go in your favor, some good closing out drives, some good final drives on defense and offense to really win these games. While maybe the season might not even result in playoffs, I think the big thing is just winning those games that are close and tight and really taking advantage of them, at least at a more successful rate than what we saw under Anthony Lynn. Personally, though, I feel like this is a potential playoff team. We talked about it already. Whoever comes in second in the AFC West should absolutely be a playoff team, and potentially whoever comes in third could very well be in that mix as well. If I'm a Chargers fan, I'm thinking second or first in my mind, because, I think everyone that's a little bit homer for their team is saying, the Chiefs aren't all that, they're able to slip, and we could see it. Anything could happen in the NFL any given Sunday. It's a huge thing. And for the Chargers, any given season, you can win the AFC West. Full on, charge on. Let's go Chargers.
Yeah, I think the Chargers, maybe this is a little controversial here, they're going to be the best football team playing in SoFi Stadium this season. Best Los Angeles football team.
That's an interesting one. And, I think it would be cool to see a Los Angeles Super Bowl, Rams versus Chargers. Maybe they'll relocate it to SoFi Stadium just to really capitalize on it.
Right. Michael, of course, has the Rams winning the Super Bowl this season.
Or wait, isn't it actually at SoFi Stadium? I think it's there, so that would be very interesting to see both these teams.
You got the home team playing in the Super Bowl last season in the Bucs, and now two home teams playing in the Super Bowl the following season. That'd be crazy.
Quite interesting. I'm sure the media would love to do the whole battle for Los Angeles type narrative.
Right. I mean, the main problem is that in Los Angeles, nobody cares about either team. So maybe a lot of San Diego guys will come up the coast and everyone's coming. Maybe some St. Louis people will come to see the Rams in the Super Bowl.
I'm sure if it's anything like Los Angeles, they'll pretend to care once they get successful.
Oh, you'll see all the celebrities in the front row or in the press boxes.
Absolutely. That's all we got for you here on Destination Draft Day, AFC West. We're jumping to the NFC next week, starting on Monday. Hope you guys have a good weekend. We thank everyone who is tuning in to this episode. We thank LandryFootball.com for the platform to really ramble on about all things football on. We'll see you guys on Monday. Take care.